You turn off. All right, what is up, Navigating Academia family? I hope you guys are having a great day so far. This is your friend and personal academic mentor, Dr. J. Phoenix Singh, coming at you guys with my first ever Instagram Live here. I haven't done this before, and so I'm hoping that anybody who's watching right now will forgive me for any foul pause that end up taking place. Speaking of foul pause, literally about 5 minutes ago, I tried to make a protein shake. This is the protein shake that I tried to make, and essentially almost killed myself. First of all, dopest protein shaker ever. Am I right? And what is going on? I see Alexa's here, Maria's here, Leo is here. It's great to be able to see you guys. I'm going to give you guys the wave here. I'm trying to get used to all this stuff in terms of the IG Live stuff. This is great. Awesome. What is up, guys? Awesome to see you. So anyway, like I was saying, literally almost killed myself this morning trying to have, hey, Alexa, this is great. I'm so glad that you're able to make it. Alexa, do you want to call in? Are you available? You can hop on? Great. Let's see. I can send you the little invite. Hey, good to see you guys. I see P. Muchani. Now, P, what is your first name so that I can say hi? Awesome. Okay, Alexa, let me see how I can do this. Give me a sec. This is my Alexa. Baboom. There we go, Alexa. I just sent you the thing. Now, guys, while Alexa's joining up here, I'll tell you guys, it was a really great week, really excited for the YouTube channel. So if anybody hasn't joined the YouTube, oh, great. Hey, Alexa, there you go. Hey, it's fine. How are you doing? Alexa, what masters are you in again? Ooh, very nice. Very nice. Do you want to work with kids? Is that the game plan? Awesome. I remember Alexa, but in terms of like the game plan, kind of, when you're done, is the plan to be able to, once you get out? Okay. Awesome. Awesome. That's awesome. Alexa, can you tell people kind of what exactly ABA is in case anybody kind of hasn't heard about that, or maybe they want to work with kids, but they just didn't know that this was one avenue that they could take at that master's level? Mhm, 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 mhm. This is great. And how does it differ? Like, let's say that somebody were to come and to just say, geez, I know about clinical psych and, I know about kind of working one-on-one and kind of that classic psychotherapeutic model. But when it comes to ABA, what are the kinds of techniques and all that are usually used that may differ from something that people in their heads may think about when they usually think about psychotherapy? Mhm, yeah. Oh, that's great. And how did you get in? Like, so what would you say? Like, so we've got a bunch of people in here now, which is great. So hey, everybody's watching. So, Alexa, what would you say? What are like the 3 best pieces of advice that you would give to somebody who maybe wants to get into an ABA program? And what are the things to maybe avoid as well? Okay. Mhm, mhm, mhm. Oh yeah. What would you say in terms of applying to the programs, right? Like just the application process itself. So what were the things that were most beneficial to actually getting into the programs, but then also what are the things that maybe you would advise people not to do during the application process? Yeah. Hmm. Okay. Oh yeah, sure. Hmm. Awesome. Mhm. Sure. Sure. It's amazing. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Awesome, Alexa. Oh yeah, totally. Uh-huh. Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they're great points, and just to be able to touch on something that you mentioned for everybody who's watching as well. When it comes to programs, especially when it comes to graduate school, oftentimes there's a lot of pressure that we kind of impose upon ourselves to be able to just say, okay, if this is probably going to be the highest level of education that I get, then I need to go to one of these schools where I'm going to take on epic, amounts of student loan debt, or they have to have, the highest names. I need to go to the Princeton of ABA, whatever that happens to be. But what I always tell people is that, at the end of the day, usually in terms of a career, people are going between the ages of, let's just say, early 20s to mid 30s. Usually, I work with a lot of people who are, they're career changers, 40s, 50s, and older even. But what ends up happening is that everybody puts that pressure on themselves to get into these kind of schools where the name itself has a huge amount of cachet. At the end of the day, it's something where so long as the program is actually a program that's accredited by whatever the body of accreditation is, APA, ASWB, uh, CACREP, any of these sorts of programs, accreditation bodies, so long as it's approved by those, at the end of the day, the preponderance of your clinical education is going to come after you get the degree, right? So remember, the goal of grad school is to get the hell out of grad school, right? Like as fast as possible with a minimal amount of trauma, and obviously, for a great student like yourself, it's one of these things where you're going to get a huge amount out of it, regardless of where you go to graduate school, because you're going to make sure that you actually, suck the marrow out of the program, get all of the education that you can, and not just kind of do the bare minimum and all, just to be able to get that degree. And of course, after you end up graduating, let's say, I mean, what's the game plan? Like, what would you like? Would you like to have a practice? Would you like to work in a clinic? Where would you like to be in, let's just say, 5 years? Sure. Okay. Okay. Sure. Okay. Okay. Cool. Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Oh, this is great, and I love. I mean, it's a huge strength. Sorry. Say that one more time, Alexa. Mhm. Oh, thank you. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Uh-huh. Oh, good job. This is great. Oh, I'm so proud of you. This is great. Yeah, this is something in terms of the masters also, right? It's great insofar as it's a couple of years that are carved out of the application process so that any of these, not holes, but potential areas that we can strengthen, right, of the CV, we can actually get that experience. So yeah, the research experience, you've got a ton of clinical experience now, which is great. Grades and everything are going okay in terms of GPA? Fantastic. This is great. Oh, no, no, of course, and yeah, just, all these little pieces of the puzzle to be able to kind of put them together, and, we'll just get a rockin' personal statement going because you've got such a great, the story, the narrative is something that's so powerful during these application processes, and you've got a great one, so this is something where you're just kind of building upon it already now, and if you did wanna go and do the doctorate afterwards, even if it's a doctorate that because if you're going to be licensed as a BCBA, and then you wanna do the doctorate, to be able to not necessarily get another licensure because you're already licensed, right? But just to be able to kind of get into the research field, it honestly is going to be exceptionally easier to be able to do that than the average applicant who's saying, I'm not clinically licensed. I've got a terminal master's, so no clinical licensure. I've just got my undergraduate degree. And in terms of that doctoral degree, I'm going for the licensure. Right. So I'm going for a clinical psych PhD. I'm going for a PsyD, but I don't have that background as a licensed clinician. Because what this means, if you're already licensed, is that to be able to get, let's just say, PhD, right, at the doctoral level, because there's a lot of different doctorates, but you want to go and get that PhD, which will end up being more of a research-based program to be able to supplement the stuff that you've already got going on. It's going to be so much easier. We're talking about acceptance rates going from, about 1% to 7%, right? Depending on the type of program. We're talking about maybe a 20% acceptance rate for doctoral program at a good mid-tier university. And of course, acceptance rates goes down the higher you go up, but like a really good mid-tier university, right? We can get like a name university, right, to be able to get that doctorate. So just keep that in mind. We don't have to go to a doctoral program that has, again, a clinical licensure element because you're already going to have that. And you can always go back. This is something where after you graduate, you can work, get that supervisory experience, these sorts of things, and then go back for the doctorate. Usually the compelling reason to be able to go all the way through once is just to be able to get that licensure, right? So and you're already going to have it. And this is year one, right? I said that we've got a year and a half left. Okay. Yeah. Great. Okay. Okay, okay. And let me know when it comes to the thesis, right? When it gets to the point that the thing is actually written, right? Do me a favor, send me an email, right? So we've got this course on translating master's theses and doctoral dissertations into publications, right? So I want to give you that class for free. So just send me an email or whatever, at least by then. But catch up with me before, obviously. But let me know so I can give you that because I want us to get that manuscript published because you're going to have worked your butt off on it. So we may as well craft it into something good. So. Awesome. You're welcome. So good to see you though, Alexa. Thank you for hopping on as my first guest here on the show. It's a pleasure. Not on Instagram. This one, no, I tried one yesterday or whatever, which was Daria and I literally just sitting around here trying to make sure I don't make a total fool of myself. So hopefully it's coming along okay. Thank you. Oh, you're the best. You're the best. Thank you so much, Alexa. And have a great rest of the week, though. I'll talk to you soon. Uh-huh. Oh, heck yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, DeFreezer. Awesome. Beautiful. Thanks, Alexa. Great to see you. I'll talk to you soon. Great. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Awesome. What is up, everybody? Guys, does anybody else want to hop on here in terms of Instagram Live? I would love to be able to hear all about what you guys have kind of got going on right now in terms of where you are in the application cycle and just literally any way that I can help. Maybe you're putting something together. Maybe you're trying to choose a target supervisor, a target program, whatever it may be. I would really love to be able to help. Maybe you guys can tell me about that. Awesome. This is great. Wang. There we go, guys. I'm just seeing how everybody is doing. This is great. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, it's great to be able to see everybody, and that was a lot of fun talking with Alexa there. And just to be able to kind of expound on a few of the things that she and I were talking about. There's this idea that, like I was mentioning, going to these really high level programs. Hey, how are you doing? Oh yeah, that's KG. KG, what is your name, my friend? That I can say what's up. That go into these programs that are kind of these really high level, high name schools will end up actually giving you more career opportunities as a private practitioner. That's not true. If you're applying for, let's say, a clinic job or a job at a hospital or, one of these sorts of things, then it is true that at the end of the day, having that bigger name school can actually mean something. Excellent. Aaron, I love you too, man. It's great to see you, buddy. Thank you so much. Oh, it's Kendra. Hey, Kendra, how you doing? It's great to see you. Um, so the idea here, sorry, I keep getting sidetracked by all my wonderful people who are here. But the idea is that if you're going to end up having a private practice at the end of the day, you should not feel compelled to go to one of these programs where you're going to end up taking on hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt. It doesn't make logical sense. It doesn't make financial sense, really. And trust me, I was in this situation too, so I totally get it. Really, the only reason to be able to do it is kind of to stroke our own egos and to be able to make ourselves feel worthy of that clinical title, whatever that is, to be, for example, to be able to get this ID and then to be able to say, yes, I'm Dr. Singh, sort of a thing. But then you're going to end up coming out with an epic amount of student loan debt that you're going to have to pay off over God knows how many years, at least a decade usually. And it's just going to be something that kind of, hampers your, continued development. So it's important to be able to come up with a game plan. For example, Kendra's in the military, right? Which is freaking awesome because I come from a military family, my mother, my grandfather, my great grandfather, and so forth. And in a case like that, where there are many opportunities to be able to get at least part, if not all, of your doctoral education subsidized, then that's a different matter. If you can cash flow the education, that's a totally different matter. But if it's a situation where you are not able to do that, then it is important to be able to go into any of these programs with your eyes wide open to be able to make sure that you already have a financial plan when you're going into this whole thing. So that's really important, guys. Okay. So in terms of big name programs, though, what I always say is that there's a great equalizing moment when it comes to therapy, because keep in mind that when you get out, I don't know why, I think everybody has these like blinders on, and I know I certainly did, insofar as thinking, okay, I'm going to go, I'm going to get my degree, I'm going to start my private practice, and then I'm going to have a lot of people coming to me. And the reason I'm going to have all these people coming in my direction is because nobody will be able to kind of like compete with me. I'm going to be the best therapist. And even if you are the best therapist, when you initially open a practice, usually we don't know a lot, right? We don't realize just how much money it's going to take to be able to run such a thing because there's so much overhead to be able to actually start your practice. You need to pay for insurance. You have all the annoying fees to be able to start up your, let's say you want to start an LLC, let's say you're American, right? So to be able to start up your LLC, to be able to, get a website going, to be able to, design a logo, all these silly things, to be able to get letterhead, to be able to get business cards, to be able to get envelopes, to be able to pay for advertising space, to get on Psychology Today or whatever kind of therapist network, you want to get onto. It is very expensive to get it done. And this is why I always recommend that when people kind of first come out of the doctorate or first come out of a clinical master's, that they don't go straight into launching their private practice, but instead they actually join up with a pre-existing private practice or even with a private clinic, something private. Why do I say private? Because at the end of the day, I want you to learn the internal workflows of a small service-related business. And that's the best way to be able to do it. Just make sure that you end up having somebody who recognizes their role as a mentor and that you make it really clear during the application process, even in an initial cover letter that you may send in before an interview, that that's what you're interested in. You're interested in getting mentored in exactly how it is that a small practice works. And you can make it really clear that that is your near-term goal. Your near-term goal is to be able to begin your own private practice. So that's just something that I want you guys to take into consideration, because the fact of the matter is you guys are going to get out of the program and you guys are probably going to have at least a 35 to 45 year career ahead of you. So at the end of the day, a 2-year master's or a 4 to 5 year doctorate is going to be less than 10% uh, essentially of your entire career in most cases. So 90% of your clinical education is going to come after you've graduated. And the thing is that that's not just true for you, it's true for everybody else. So by the time that you get into the market and start, let's say, your private practice, there is already going to be a very, very large group of individuals who are what I refer to as incumbents, right? In other words, these are therapists who've been there for decades usually, and they've really established not only a strong client base, but also they're getting recurring or reoccurring, we would say, clients of people who've been to therapy and then everything is fine. And then, God forbid, somebody in the family passes away, and then they kind of end up coming back to the same individuals. So it's kind of this evergreen cycle after you have enough individuals in your caseload. And somebody's asking, yeah, how many people in your caseload? So usually you're going to end up having 20 to 30 people in your caseload for a full-time caseload. That's the idea. So if you can end up getting kind of a critical mass of clients, then you're going to be great. Right. And that's something, like I said, that's going to just kind of keep renewing itself. But at the end of the day, so me personally, so like I've, been in therapy and I've had, multiple therapists. I can tell you that the best therapist that I have ever had in my life, none of them had a doctorate. None of them had a psych doctorate. None of them had counseling, EDD doctorate, nothing, right? The two best therapists that I ever had, one of them was a social worker and one of them was a counselor, both of them at the master's level. Both of them, considerably older than myself, I would say, but they knew exactly what they were doing. They were phenomenal therapists. They were so skilled. And I remember asking Rob. Rob was my last therapist and the best therapist, I would say, arguably I ever had. And I asked Rob, I said, how did you, gain these kinds of skills? Because he was really quite exceptional. And I'm a bit of a dick in most ways, but especially in this way, in terms of when it comes to kind of, evaluating, therapists and therapeutic skills and all. And he was just amazing. And he told me, he said, because he used to be an artist, he was a sculptor, right? And so he was a career changer himself. And he's one of those guys who, like, he had the personality for it. He's retired now, but he had the personality for it, and really, like I said, knew what he was doing. And he basically told me, he's like, Jay, when I got out of graduate school, he started working for this clinic, and he, just like Alexa wants to, right? He became a supervisor, and he had somebody who was kind of like the big boss supervising him. And he said that experience gave him more knowledge than essentially anything that he could have learned in graduate school, and a lot of practical experience as well, working not only with clients but also working with other therapists. And that collectively, this experience is something that resulted, or that he says resulted, in kind of launching him into his career. So I really do recommend taking a look at something like that. And I don't think that you should worry about getting a master's if you initially dreamt of getting a doctorate, but you realize, wait a minute, I actually don't need the doctorate to do exactly what I want to do. So, for example, if you want to start a private practice, you can just get MSW, an MA in counseling in most states, and just start your clinical practice. In some states, also, you can just get a master's in clinical psychology, which usually is a terminal degree. But there are some states in the U.S. where you can essentially apply, get in, complete the program, and provided you're being supervised by an APA accredited doctoral level supervisor, right, you can practice, right? So you can just be a part of that private practice. And at the end of the day, the amount of pay difference is maybe 10 to 20% an hour, I would say, between master's level and doctoral level. However, for the doctoral level, especially if you're coming in with student loans, right, if you end up going to a PsyD program, the average PsyD applicant, we've talked about this on the channel, average PsyD applicant is going to end up coming out of one of those programs with about 125 to 150,000 US dollars, right? And education prices just keep going up, right? However, right, if you take a look, so for example, I had an applicant who I had the pleasure of working with 2 cycles ago, and I can't believe this new cycle is just going to start up here in literally a few weeks. So October, November, December is when like ish gets real, stuff gets crazy. So you just need to be aware that that's going to be starting up, right, in terms of the application cycle. So what happens is that, and I'm just checking, guys, sorry. Anybody? And Karen. Okay, great. So what happened? Dory, are you still on? No? Okay. because I was looking at there are three people, and I was just like, "Is she there? She's not there." Okay, that's hilarious. So sorry, we're literally it's morning time here in Indonesia, so we're just in Bali for the next. I guess we've got one more month as well. So hey, it's so fun. Uh, Anyway, I'm forgetting, guys, what I'm talking about. Please, somebody ask me a question. Just do me a favor. Give me anything to be able to talk about, because otherwise I'm just going to be monologuing like crazy. Excellent. And Ben's here. Ben, what's up, man? Good to be able to see everybody. Ben, there we go. Hey, Dory's there. Okay, guys, so let me tell you guys a little bit about this masterclass that I end up building for you guys, which is this free thing that's going to launch later on this month, because I would really love for you guys to watch it. So essentially, a few weeks ago, let's see, how do you view preprints? Oh, good question. Okay, so I'll answer that first, then I'll get to the masterclass. I'll make a note for myself. So how do you view preprints? Okay, so really, in this day and age, the only way to view preprints is to be able to go into something that is referred to as an open repository. Okay, there is a website I want you to go to right now. I want you to put into Google ROAR, like a lion, right? Like roar, right? So good night, man. So ROAR, and then I want you to write in there open repository. So ROAR, sorry, right? Open repository. And when you go there, it is the largest database of open repositories on the internet. Now, if anybody's not familiar with, open science as a phenomenon, open access, open data, open software, open code, all these things, essentially what it is the scientific movement, and the belief behind it is that science belongs to everyone. Scientific findings should belong to everyone, should be accessible to everyone. As you guys know, 60% of all academic journals and books are published by the same 5 publishers, called the Big Five. So it's Sage, Wiley, Springer, Routledge, and Taylor and Francis, right? Excellent. Hey, guys. And Taylor and Francis. So at the end of the day, right, they have this huge monopoly. So open science is basically trying to topple that tower, as it were, and make it so that anybody can access, these sorts of things. So in terms of open repositories, the idea is that if you take your article and you want to publish it, and you want to publish it in a place that does not have some kind of an open access option. So for example, let's say that, like, there's a journal, for instance, it's called Law and Human Behavior. It's the #1 journal in my field, which is forensic psychology. Yes, you can pay a lot of money and kind of end up getting it open access. However, you can also take your article, but you would take the Microsoft Word version of it, not the professionally formatted, the beautiful looking format that looks like a journal article. You would not take that, right, and be able to deposit it. Hey, bub, you would not be able to deposit it into a repository, because the intellectual property for that formatting belongs to the publisher. It does not belong to yourself. However, the Microsoft Word document, that intellectual property does belong to you and your team. So essentially, you can take that and you can deposit it into one of these open access repositories. Why are there so many? Because there's a lot that are specific to your field. There will be open access repositories for psychology, for nursing, for education, for all of these different things. Hey, Mandy. Right, for all of these different things. So the idea here is that if you can actually find the right repository, deposit your piece in there through meta tags, right, you will be able to essentially make your piece searchable, right? And the better you do with the tags, the higher the search engine optimization, and people will be able to take a look at your preprints. Also, those are the places, in terms of the repositories, where you would be able to do things like open your preprint for what is called open review. The idea here, again, that open science, this concept that science belongs to everyone. Some people say, you know what, before submitting my piece for formal peer review consideration, at an academic journal, preferably one with an impact factor, right? Before doing that, I want other people to read my piece objectively and let me know what they think. So usually there would be no way to do that. You'd have to just submit your piece to a journal, wait 6 to 8 weeks usually to be able to get feedback from peer reviewers, along with a preliminary editorial decision. But with open review, you can take your piece, you can deposit it, and then you can just say, this is open for open review. And then anybody would be able to go and take a look at your piece and give you hopefully constructive feedback on it and help you to basically polish your piece up before you end up submitting it for peer review. So that's one way to be able to look at preprints. And the other way is that if you end up going to something like usually a conference, right, and there's a presenter and they present a paper presentation or a poster presentation, and you're like, wow, I really like this. Make sure that you write down the name of whoever the presenter was, right? And I want you to write down their email address and then just shoot them a brief email afterwards asking whether or not they happen to have any preprints that you can take a look at. In other words, a preprint, anybody doesn't know, it's basically just an unpublished version of a manuscript. That's what it is, right? And that differs significantly from something that is called a page proof, which is also synonymously known as a galley proof. And what those are, page proofs, galley proofs, is that you've taken your manuscript, you've submitted it, acceptance. What's going to happen next? Okay, well, they end up sending, these publishers usually externally contract with usually companies that are in India, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, to be able to format everything, right? So that it looks like a journal article, right? And you guys know what I mean. These journals, usually you end up just cracking them open. You're like, wow, this looks so professional. Well, that's what happens here, right? And usually they also will send your piece off to a copy editor, right, for them to be able to take a look at it for any minor changes, right? They won't send it off to a copy editor, and let's just say that whatever the language of the journal is, let's just say it's English, right? There's journals in all languages. But if it's in English, and there's a lot of grammatical errors in these things, they're not going to accept the piece in the first place, right? The piece usually is going to end up getting desk rejected by the editor before it even goes for peer review, or the peer reviewers are going to tell you, you need to get a copy editor or I will not agree to accept this, right? But for little minor things, usually these folks who are reviewing the piece, they can pick up on that. And so what will happen is that these companies, these external companies, will produce a PDF version of your article, and it's going to look blinged out, it's going to look beautiful and so forth. But there may be some final comments that are on there, or they're going to provide you with the opportunity to be able to have a look and read the piece one final time with their annotations to be able to see if you make any final changes. It is so critical, guys, that you read those page proofs. My first publication as a first author came out in 2008 or 2010. I'm trying to remember. But I still remember it was called Forensic Risk Assessment, a Meta Review or something like that. You can still find it. I'm sure there's an open access version out there somewhere. And guys, first of all, it's terribly written. As a guy who specializes in getting people published, I don't know how I was so bad. So you got to trust me. If I can publish now quite well, you can publish quite well also. Okay, there's nothing unique about me in this regard. And so what happens is that I didn't read the page proofs. To be honest with you, I was just so damn excited that something was getting published, and I wanted to get it published as fast as possible. So I gave it this little cursory look, and I didn't do the one thing that you're really supposed to do, which is read through the appendices. And I really want you to focus on the formatting and all of the words and everything in tables and figures. That is what I did not do, right? I did not pay attention to that. And what ended up happening, unfortunately, was that I published this piece, and down in the table note of one of them, in parentheses, instead of it actually having the references, like the citations for each one of these different psychological tests that I used, I forgot to change the text. And so literally, it just gave the acronym. So it'd be like PCLR, and then in parentheses, it just said insert citation here, comma, HCR 20. Insert citation here. Everything was insert citation here. So I made a total jackass out of myself. And a few people have kind of caught it. And I certainly don't mind talking about it or showing people, because I find it really funny now, because you got to learn from the mistakes, right? But those are page proofs, right? So those are preprints and then galley proofs and page proofs, right? That is what those things are, okay? So very good. Excellent question. Anybody else have more questions? I love answering your guys' questions. And obviously, if anybody wants to come on live, I would love to be able to talk to you and to be able to help you out however I can, especially in terms of application process, interviews, these sorts of things, even just general career advice if you're trying to figure out, where do you want to be next? Where do you want to go? And there should be a button, right, in terms of to be able to to join. Otherwise, you can always write and say, I want to join, and then I can do the inviting from my side. But does anybody have any questions that I can answer? Excellent. Thank you, Mandy. So, guys, Mandy here is What's Your Gonna Star 2021. Mandy, do you have to change your handle like every year to be able to keep it up to date? 2021, like next year, do you have to change to Wishing on a Star 2023? Is that a thing? Excellent. And Daria's being Daria's being super cute. Daria's like, how are you staying so handsome? This is the Daria accent. Thanks, hon. So anyway, Mandy, guys, joined this thing that I ran 2 years ago, which was so much fun. She easily was one of my favorite people in the mastermind. She was great. And basically what we ran is this thing called a mastermind. Now, I'm curious, guys, has anybody else ever done one of these things, one of these masterminds? I'm just being honest, like I had never heard of one until about like a year beforehand. Oh, Kendra, good question. Okay, I'll answer that after. And the mastermind, basically what we did is that I think it was like 50 or all 50, it could have been all 52 weeks of the year. We had a 1-hour class every single week, week after week after week. And I had 2 different cohorts. And literally every single week, we'd get all these really talented academics together. And these academics, had a awesome, thank you, Mandy. Mandy says, it was the best, seriously, so valuable, learned a lot. Thanks, Mandy. And it was one of these things where we talked about how to be able to do every core writing skill in academia. So how to be able to, write and publish every section, every piece of the puzzle in peer-reviewed journal articles, conference papers and posters, building conference symposia, how to be able to get edited book contracts, how to be able to publish edited book chapters, all of these things, how to be able to do what are called special issues. So it's a stepping stone to be able to get you on the editorial board or even as an editor or associate editor of a journal. All of these things we talked about all together, APA 7th style. And so anyway, so all of this work that we did together, though, that I did with Mandy and everybody else, which was really transformative for me, just being the instructor for those courses, also ended up being something that evolved into this Publication Academy thing that I run now. So Publication Academy is basically the pre-recorded, like professionally recorded version. So I didn't just film myself giving the live course and then put it online, but it's the professionally recorded version of that. So definitely, if you haven't checked out publicationacademy.com, definitely let me know. And I've thought also, if anybody's interested in me hosting another one of those, weekly mastermind things, please let me know. And we can definitely do that at some stage. Okay. So, guys, keep the questions coming. This is great. Kendra's question was, what are your thoughts on PsyD versus PhD? It's a great question. Let's put it this way. If you had asked me back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was first starting, what I thought about something like that, I would kind of laugh and I would say, well, it's really obvious that, PhD is the way to go, because those programs have been around for, at this stage coming up on 100 years, so, like a really exceptionally long period of time. However, right, these days it's something where both degrees, both PsyDs and clinical psych PhDs serve relevant functions, right? The most important thing in terms of, let's talk PsyDs for a second, right? The most important things to understand about PsyDs is that, number one, they're a newer degree. Thanks, Kendra. Number one, they're a newer degree, right? And because of that, think about it. Anytime that something is new, right, especially an educational program, it's going to take decades, right, for there to be people who have that degree, who are notorious enough, like they've built up enough stuff, they've written enough books, they've appeared on enough TV shows, that other people say, hey, this is credible, right? So if a degree doesn't lend credibility, then other people don't want it, right? Or they question it. But the good news now is that now it's been, many decades since PsyDs kind of, initially came around. The first ones came in like the 70s, but I had never heard of these things until the 90s. And I can tell you that in terms of academic departments, I have only ever been in one academic department that had one PsyD as a faculty member. Right now, of course, if you end up going to PsyD programs, you're going to have a lot of faculty members who have PsyDs usually, but it's a newer degree. And so because of that, it's also less understood by people who are kind of, again, incumbents. We used that term earlier today in the live stream, right? Who are incumbents in the field, right now. And I mean that both from a research perspective, but also just from a practical perspective of other practitioners. Mental health is a very annoyingly hierarchical structure where psychiatrists look down on psychologists look down on counselors look down on social workers, and so on and so forth. And it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Right. And I do see it. Like I hear, psychologists bad mouthing each other. I hear PhDs bad mouthing PsyDs. I hear PsyDs bad mouthing counselors. I mean, it's just really dumb, really dumb. Now, it's not young people who are doing this. It's usually people who, they've been in the field for, 40 years and these sorts of things. And for me, being a behavioral health specialist, it's discouraging to be able to see people, other behavioral health specialists doing this to each other. It's really annoying, honestly. But it does happen. But for PsyDs, number one, newer degree, right? And part of it being a newer degree means that it's, just so slow. Hey, Kaden, right? So slow, just slowly but surely, right? That you are going to see this evolution, right? Of programs, like educational programs at the higher name, more established schools, the name schools, as you and I could call them, right? The ones with the name recognition, accepting these degrees. And finally, we're starting to see that, like even in Virginia, right? So it's like, I'm from Virginia, born and raised. I love Virginia, right? My whole family's there. Best friends are there. And so what happens is that in Virginia now, there used to be only like a few, like 2 or 3 PsyD programs. And now the bigger name universities in the state are now adopting these things, like JMU, James Madison University, just became the newest university to offer a fully funded PsyD program. So if you're interested in fully funded PsyD programs, hey, Tanji, right? Fully funded PsyD programs, right? Then make sure to add JMU to your list. But just know they do require a master's, right, for you to be able to do that first, right? Radford is building its own PsyD. Liberty University is now, I think they're contingent. They're accepted on contingencies. Hey, Angela, right? They're accepted on contingency. So that's a school to be able to take a look at. So now also, let's go to the West Coast, right? You've got this, you've got Palo Alto has had this consortium with Stanford for the longest time. And so you can get, trained by some Stanford professors. You can go to Pepperdine. I mean, there's some really big name universities, even state schools now that are offering these types of degrees. And that's great because it lends a lot of credibility. But you do need to know as a PsyD or whatever about this bullshit hierarchy in terms of, what people are looking at. In terms of PsyDs versus PhDs. Clinical psych PhDs, there is a deep misunderstanding insofar as the way that some PsyD programs try to market themselves is basically by saying, oh, clinical psych PhD program, they're not clinical, they're research. If you want to be a researcher, that's where you go. You're not going to get good clinical training in these things. You need to go the PsyD route. That's bullshit, right? That's just completely untrue, right? No, you can just go to a clinical psych PhD program, which is APA accredited, and get a phenomenal clinical education, right? It's the OG clinical degree, right? For psychologists, it is the OG. So if you end up going to an amazing university, yes, usually the programs take a little bit longer to be able to graduate because you're going to be doing more research. But remember, even if you're in a PsyD, this is the other thing. I have a lot of people who I have the pleasure of working with, and I help them get into PsyD programs. And they're just like, Dr. Singh, I hate research. Like I hate stats usually is what it is, right? Or I don't want to be a researcher. And to be honest with you, that is more than fair enough. You're talking to the guy who chose his undergrad, right? In terms of where to go based on where it didn't make him take calculus. I've never taken calculus. That is the reason I ended up going to Tufts instead of Wesleyan, right? Was because Wesleyan was going to make me take calc my freshman year. I didn't want to do it, right? And that's true, right? And for somebody who became like an epidemiological statistics professor, right? Like that's shameful, right? But I do love me some stats. So what ended up happening, though, in terms of this process, is that I've learned that PsyDs, at the end of the day, need to become what I refer to as conscientious consumers of the peer-reviewed research literature. And what I mean by that is that PsyDs, if they do have that deep desire to go and to be able to work with clients, you need to know not only what is evidence-based in the past, so like when you go to grad school, right, like what is the current state of the art, but you need to be tracking it, right? For, your target population, your, preferred form of therapy and so forth. These things are not static. They evolve over time. Diagnostic categories evolve over time. So it's very, very important that we stay abreast of the latest developments in this regard. And the way to be able to do that, the way to be able to stay up to date is to be able to read the research literature. But if you don't know how to be able to find journal articles, if you don't know how to be able to read them, if you don't know how to be able to kind of suss out the good from the bad, which is the most essential skill, I swear to God, right? Is to be able to, because these peer-reviewed journal articles, I don't know about you, for me, I used to think that anybody who's publishing these peer-reviewed journal articles, that they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew way better than anybody else, and that if it's published, that means it's true, and that is complete nonsense. Um, Case in point, my field is prediction of future violence. We call it violence risk assessment. 96% of studies published between 2005 and I think it was 2011 or 2013, all of them, right? So 96% of studies in the field that are testing the accuracy of these risk assessment protocols use the same statistic. It's called the area under the curve, right? And in those studies, in 60% of those studies, they misdefine or misinterpret what the AUC means. And the problem is that those papers that get published that say something fundamentally wrong, other people read them and say, oh, okay, if that's the case, I'm going to publish a paper and I'm going to say the same untrue thing, and I'm just going to cite these guys. And that literally is what ends up happening, is that people end up citing one another, right? And it ends up being this epic game of scholarly telephone where the false findings, false methodologies end up going around, and in some cases, unfortunately, become the gold standard of the field. Even if it was well-intentioned at first, oftentimes it kind of doesn't end up that way. So in any case, that's kind of the big issue that people are going to end up coming up with. So clinical psych, PsyD, yes, you still need to get really good at research. Usually you're going to still end up doing some kind of dissertation project. I'd be lying to you if I told you that it wasn't kind of a joke, insofar as if you really hate research and stats and you're afraid of the dissertation for the PsyD, please don't be afraid, right? It's something where usually it's honestly pretty innocuous. You can end up doing a digital survey. You can do a case series analysis. You can do a retrospective study, using available file information. This does not have to be some crazy thing, right? It's not like in a clinical psych PhD where it is much more involved in terms of doing a minimum of one large research project. For me, for my doctorates, remember I've got the 2 doctorates, right? And for both of them, there were multiple projects that were involved, right? So the one was in psychiatry from Oxford, and the other one was in clinical psychology from University of Konstanz. So it's one of those situations where you just have to, not be intimidated by that process. Okay. In terms of PsyD, what is it? I think it's 86%. It's mid 80s, right? So I'll just say 86. 86% of PsyD programs do not provide any kind of funding, not just not partial, but not even like $5,000 a year. No, nothing, right? Versus over 95% of clinical psych PhD programs waive the tuition. And you may say, well, wait a minute, how is that possible? Well, remember, when it comes to PhD programs, oftentimes the professors in those departments, and these tend to be larger universities, they are getting partially funded through grants. And when you write a grant, excellent, great to see you guys, thanks. When you write a grant, you usually will write in some staff that you want, a graduate student, a postdoctoral fellow, whatever it happens to be. And usually it's under a personnel or a staff section of your budget, right? And you need to have a budget and a budget narrative are 2 standard pieces of the 10 usual standard 10 sections of a grant that you would write. And you basically would say, I need these individuals to be able to properly execute this funding contract. And then at the end of the day, if you get the funding, then you can actually bring in that graduate student. And obviously, if you're getting paid from the grant and you've already allocated the money in the grant budget, and in the budget narrative to that particular purpose, then it's not like you can say, okay, well, I'm only going to give them 10 grand, right? And then they can, pay the rest. No, but like you have to do it, right? Or otherwise you will not get funded by that agency again, and they contractually can take the money back from you. So this is one of the big reasons why PhD programs are able to waive tuition for society programs are not. Right. The other way that, to be able to get funding, obviously, is to be able to work. I do not recommend having some kind of a full-time job while you are doing PhD, PsyD, any kind of graduate school studies, personal opinion, right? If it's something where the school is online and you can do school in the evenings or school during the day and then work during the evenings, part-time, I think that's fair enough. But I do think that it's something where the financials are something that not enough people really think about in terms of the application process. So I would say that those are the things to take into consideration. The only other thing that I would say quickly is that when it comes to PsyD programs, do not trust the programs that talk about you having a concentration or a track or a focus. They'll be like, we have a concentration, a PsyD with a concentration in forensic, or a PsyD with a developmental track. Just remember that that's a marketing gimmick, right? It's a total gimmick, right? If you end up getting out of the program, and let's say you've never taken a forensic psych class, and you are not in the forensic psych concentration or the developmental concentration, and then you decide, I don't want to work with kids. I actually want to work with probation officers. I want to work with offenders. I want to work in prison, so on and so forth. It would be logical for you to think, okay, so I guess I can't do that. I guess I can't work with that population. But that is just not the truth. You absolutely can work with those populations, and there is no reason whatsoever that just because you don't have a concentration or a focus or a track that you are, inhibiting yourself from in the future working with a different population. Like I said, it is a marketing gimmick. Right now, obviously, in clinical psych PhD programs, when I say it's not a marketing gimmick, what I mean is that if you apply to a clinical forensic program, that's clinical forensic program, right? Like that's a thing, right? So that's different. PsyD programs, there's also significantly fewer of them. And remember, we've got videos on the channel to be able to teach you how to be able to find what these programs are. And my goal always for you is to apply to 5 to 7 programs. Right. Fewer would also be fine, but like 5 to 7 max. And people think I'm crazy, but I've never had anybody disappointed when they use the strategy that I talk about in terms of 5 to 7 programs, because it gives you enough time to be able to actually, look into all this stuff. Right. And it's really important that you know about every program that you're applying to. It's a really key thing. So, all right, guys, that is it for me today. I think first Instagram live in the books. I appreciate you guys. If you enjoyed this, please do let me know. I'll try to post this on YouTube as well for anybody who wasn't able to attend. So lots of love, guys. I appreciate you. Consider calling back next time, or calling in next time, because I'd love to be able to talk to you. All right, guys, lots of love. Bye-bye.